Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends of the institution, I'm truly honoured and delighted to be taking up the role of President of this institution. Today, the institution's purpose, in the light of many complex challenges before us, is as vital as ever to the future of our profession. As we work to develop built environments that better the lives of everyone around the world, I look to my presidency as an opportunity to work with all of you to shape a successful future where we and those joining our profession in years to come will have a broad outlook, deep technical expertise, and exercise leadership to take our profession forward. We are all very aware the world is changing at a scale that challenges our ability to adapt fast enough, or even to understand the implications of some of those changes occurring. We cannot, individually or collectively as a profession, afford to stand still. Climate change, rapid urbanisation, and demographic shifts are critical as we look to the future of the built environment, and they also affect how we practice. Our day-to-day work is affected very much by technological change. However, it's undeniable that the skills of structural engineers will continue to be in demand. We are needed. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that as structural engineers we have all the answers to these complex challenges. But what I do say is that we play an important role in bringing about real solutions. To play this role to the full and to be active in shaping our future and the future of the environment, I see it as vital that as a profession we are broad in our outlook, we're deep in our expertise, and we are leaders who embrace change. And these are the 3 topics that I'm going to expand on. So first, look at why we need a broad outlook. We can look to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to see the impact we must have, which will only be achieved if we are both experts in our profession and collaborative in our approach. The goals in themselves represent a phenomenal collaboration. They were developed over 15 years through consultation with over 5 million people across very many countries. And these goals were then agreed on by all 193 of the United Nations. They inspire us to be ambitious and visionary, to work with others to achieve tangible results. We could look at 2 of these goals as an example. Goal 11 is to make cities inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable. And Goal 12, to ensure sustainable consumption of products and patterns. We know that cities are hubs for people and business, ideas and culture. And we know that cities face many challenges with pressures on finance, housing, transportation, for example. And we must be active we must be actively interested in city-scale development because this represents the greatest opportunity to sustainably manage resources and combat climate change. But time is short and action is needed on many fronts. Buildings and infrastructure are the physical fabric of our cities and will contribute to these goals. But we do need broad thinking and to work with ideas and professions beyond the traditional set of building engineering skills. So I have a few examples to illustrate what I mean. If you think of building adaptability and reuse, this circular building created last year was a demonstrator to show that a building can be constructed such that all the components can be returned to their original suppliers. The idea of the circular economy is that products retain their maximum value through multiple life cycles. rather than a typical situation of recovering demolition products with a much lower value. And this is possible to do, as this was demonstrated, through collaboration with engineers, architects, constructors working very closely together. But innovation at this technical level on its own will not bring about change quickly enough, and we do need to influence policy and work closely with those who understand the economics of development. So there are many dimensions to getting it right, and we just need to think more broadly about the issues. Let's think of greening the city. There are multiple benefits from introducing vegetation and greenery into building facades and roofs. Air quality is improved because plants trap particulates. Noise is dampened. But these things do depend upon the configuration of buildings and the streets. And this is a picture of green algae used in facades, which grow in response to sunlight and therefore affect the light going into the building to benefit them. And the algae produce energy, so buildings can produce as much energy as they consume. But in order to get all these benefits, we need imagination, we need design integration, we need a lot of collaboration. My third example is to recognize that successful cities work for everyone. The acclaimed author and urban activist Jane Jacobs, who wrote The Death and Life of Great American Cities, said this: "There is no logic that can be superimposed on the city. People make it, and it is to them, not to buildings, we must fit our plans." And designing for people means recognizing the scale of issues, such as highlighted by the UN, that over 1 billion people live with disability, that within 15 years, 60% of urban dwellers who take the whole world will be under the age of 18. So this image I like because it shows a community organization in India encouraging children to draw maps of their local communities. And using hand-drawn maps across a network of children's clubs gives a voice to a community that would otherwise be overlooked. And they can highlight from their perspective issues of safety and access. These are just a few ways of saying that to actively participate in addressing complex challenges does require us to broaden our outlook and take on board other people's perspectives. I'm going to use an illustration from my family past. Here is a perspective. This is a painting painted by my father when I was a child in Hong Kong. So because he painted this, we can understand a little bit about him. Firstly, I said it's my father, so you know it's another generation, but it's obviously not Hong Kong today. And what I heard was that to be able to get that view, he had to leave a few trees out of the way. But if you could look at it closely, you'd see that the greatest detail is of the harbour. You see the black and white building there, because he worked there at HMS Tamar, the naval base. So we can see that's what he knew best. So that's a perspective, and if you see what someone else sees, you understand more about their contribution, their aspirations. And we need to stretch ourselves to be open to the ideas of others in order to properly collaborate. An example in our professional life might be recognizing the different perspectives of academia and industry. So that's been something for me. They don't always easily come together. I had the privilege of serving on the Joint Board of Moderators, which accredits undergraduate degrees, and also working on the panel, our national panel, and many countries do a similar thing, that every 6 or 7 years goes through an enormous exercise looking at the quality of research in our universities. So I became more aware of the perspectives of academics and the benefit of working together. And it stood in great stead when in Arup we created master's level learning programs that were a real collaboration between academia and industry. An example was a program in energy futures with Warwick University. And it was the first time that they opened their Global Energy MBA to a cohort from one company. And it wasn't about the income, it was about the genuine collaboration with industry in terms of what they needed from that period of learning. So addressing multifaceted challenges needs a broad outlook, and we need multiple viewpoints. This isn't alien to us, because complex challenges are fundamentally why most of us are engineers. We have an unquenchable desire to make a positive difference in the world. We pursue a fundamental understanding of the issues and use our skills to realize practical solutions which make the built environment better. Better because of our efforts. My inspiration to become an engineer came partly from a sixth form visit to the Wallingford Hydraulics Research Station, which was established at the time by government, since privatised, to investigate issues such as coastal erosion, flood protection, and the design of marine infrastructure, such as harbours. And this is a recent model of the Aberdeen Harbour expansion project. To see these huge models was enormously exciting and helped me see how the practical application of scientific knowledge really works itself out. As a child, I was not somebody who took things apart, as you often hear in these addresses. I didn't have a fascination with trains or engines. I did play with Meccano and Lego, but at university I was somewhat daunted by many in my class who seemed steeped in knowledge of what goes on under the bonnet of a car and excelled in electronics because they built radios in their spare time. But it was this visit which really inspired me. As I looked more into engineering, I increasingly saw how conceptual thinking, modelling, construction skills come together in different ways in every project, and that is what is at the heart of an engineering career. Between school and university, I was able to work on a very complex basement. This was for the Lloyd's building in the heart of the City of London. And I was very fortunate to be in the hands of experienced resident engineers. And the site experience gave me the determination to follow a career in structural engineering. My degree was in engineering science, and not many followed into structures, but I'm glad I did. And when I joined Arup as a graduate, I therefore had a very strong sense of the importance of technical skills and practical skills. And I often look back warmly to my experience on site about 2 years after graduation because of this person, Percy Halpin II. He was the foreman on this site, and he was absolutely passionate about his work. In fact, he would go around the site quizzing people with questions from the technician exam and say, how do you know you're doing the right thing here? How do you build this formwork? What are you meant to be doing here? And he had a former career in a music hall, so from time to time he would take to balancing his hat on his nose. And when you look at this picture, you think, well, we really have come a very long way. I am very old. It looks a bit like we're going to fall off the edge of the slab there. Well, nearly all the projects that I worked on have been built, which enabled me to grow rapidly in experience, and I learnt from so many people. But ultimately, it's the impact of what we do that fuels our motivation. I'm very proud to have had a role in creating Tate Modern, which saw this vast neglected power station given a new life. As the disused Bankside power station, it was a forbidding, derelict building. It was originally designed by the architect Giles Gilbert Scott, but known to very few as it was only accessible through narrow streets on the south side of the river in London. And you could see it from the river, but it was pretty dull looking. But the combined imagination of the client and the engineer led to this being converted into a home of modern art. We retained the envelope of the building, which meant there was a sympathy with the history of the city, and the industrial feel internally as well was very much what appealed to the art community. There were over 1 million visitors in the first 2 months. It received worldwide acclaim. And for me, the most rewarding aspect is the impact it had on regeneration in that part of London. Now, it was a very multidisciplinary project, and successful multidisciplinary integrated design needs great teamwork. I believe, and I have found, as I've done things that are not directly engineering projects, that we do have this huge asset as structural engineers, that we're very good at teamwork and collaborating. And a highlight for me of teamwork was the ITN building. This is the Independent Television News building in London. The project was groundbreaking in many ways, and it just had the fantastic can-do attitude across the whole team. And most of the key players in that project went on to be leaders in industry. The architect, Foster & Partners, Ken Shuttleworth, actually took the atrium right through the building down to the basement. And the building resolved the irregularity of the footprint of the site with a trapezoidal atrium. Construction was speeded up because this was one of the first projects of Ray O'Rourke in London. And many people know Ray O'Rourke, CEO of Lang O'Rourke today. And the quality of the concrete which was exposed and the quality of construction came from this very close collaboration of all the parties. And it was typical of what I was privileged to experience on all my projects, thinking of the construction process throughout the design. So when I say we need a broad outlook, this definitely encompasses multidisciplinary thinking and great teamwork. If we're to contribute to this teamwork, we must be experts in our own field. And so my second action for the year ahead is to discuss deepening our technical expertise. And I want to highlight the importance of communities in fostering our learning. In our profession, quality should not have a sliding scale. Our work must always be of the highest quality, not just as a matter of pride, but for public safety. We have such a direct impact on public safety and well-being that we have no scope for diminishing technical excellence. In fact, the opposite is true. We recently celebrated the 50th year of the Structural Awards, which showcased excellent work from teams around the world, from new tall and slender structures to providing new life to existing bridges and stadia. And the ability of our members to produce truly innovative work with the highest level of technical excellence is phenomenal. As engineers, we are by our nature future seekers. Engineers create structures and environments. We have the imagination, vision, and courage and confidence in our skills to challenge conventional ideas, using our deep expertise to achieve the best project results. In 1990, I returned from a posting to Japan, and I joined the design team of the American Air Museum at Duxford, a 90-meter span, a dome arch shape. Designs had been sketched in steelwork, and these were fine, but there was a lot of discussion about the soffit cladding and maintenance and so on. I proposed the roof be built in concrete. A concrete solution would give a clean backdrop to viewing the aircraft that were hanging in this museum, and provide thermal mass to moderate the temperature and humidity which was needed for the preservation of the aircraft. At 90 metres and being neither a dome nor an arch, I wondered how we could do this. Now, I had been inspired in Japan by the building designed by Kenzo Tange for the Olympics in 1964, which is the one on the top left. And earlier in my career, when I was reading about engineering, I had been really inspired by the work of Felix Candela, and you see him there with one of his arches. My husband's family live in Dublin, where two of Arup's early shell projects were built, and on the bottom left you see the Donnybrook bus garage, which is still operating as bus garage 60 years later. So we studied these designs, and we took inspiration also from this building, which is the Centre of New Industries and Technologies in Paris, designed by the engineer Jean Prouvé. And you might recognize it, some of you, from the original film, The Italian Job, because it's the roof where the minis are chasing each other up and down. But these people were giants of structural engineering, and shells had rather fallen out of fashion. Could we do it again? Well, this Jean Prouvé building and a couple of others were particularly useful to us as they're double shells. And I saw that the roof could work as a double shell. And knowing the creativity of Ray O'Rourke, sought him out and talked it through, and his enthusiasm spurred us on. And the scheme was built as a double shell, a precast double U, and an in situ upper layer. Slightly more expensive than steel, but in the long run cheaper because of the reduced maintenance costs. As engineers, our future-seeking, innovative natures bring about tangible good through our technical practice. Our profession must keep skills up to date and relevant for project needs. Now, skills cannot stagnate, but must be continually nurtured and stimulated. This institution plays a vital role in this by providing a multitude of opportunities through which we can share learning across the profession. And critical to this is fostering our communities of interest. Communities make the most of everyone's strengths. The more people contribute, the greater the learning. So we learn from successes, as in the awards, and we learn from failures, and then we often learn more from failures. So one example I want to highlight of learning across our community is the confidential reporting scheme on structural safety, which is CROSS. Now, before I talk about this, let me first introduce SCOSS. Here's the first report from SCOSS, the Standing Committee on Structural Safety, which was set up in 1977 after investigation and discussion following a number of collapses in the 60s and 70s, including Ronan Point and the Box Girder Bridge collapses. And in investigating these, it became apparent that the mastery of new technical advances in methods and materials were not fully embedded across professional practice. And it was recommended that an expert committee was established on a permanent basis to review questions of structural safety and make recommendations for action. So that committee is SCOSS, and it continues to do that and consider trends in practice that pose risk to structural safety and follow up with recommendations. And it's jointly sponsored between this institution and the Institution of Civil Engineers and the Health and Safety Executive. And I sat on SCOSS for 6 years. Now, the thing is, it is a relatively formal approach to reviewing lessons learned because it relies on information brought to it through experts or with significant evidence to say this is an issue. And, you know, if something actually has gone badly wrong, then that's often clouded in restrictions on what can be shared. And its work reports through reports that have these sort of headings: immediate priority recommendations, strong recommendations, review of trends. So It is saying what must be done about the situation. But most people are not really in a position to make lengthy submissions or do the research, but everybody experiences near misses. Everybody does. So the confidential reporting scheme on structural safety, or CROSS, was introduced to enable experiences to be shared quickly. So that means doing it confidentially, because otherwise there's a lot of checking of context and permissions needed. So the basic information is stripped out and reported as just a thing, a pithy thing. And a newsletter has these sorts of headings: an inadequate end-bearing issue, holding down bolts in bending, thin stone cladding problems. And the highlight is on the particular thing that happened. And I think it makes everybody sit up and say, oh, goodness, do we have one of those? It is not whistleblowing in any way, because no action is taken on a single report. But over time, data is gathered on construction matters or issues generating concern. And the rigour behind CROSS has come from mature schemes in the aviation industry. So in running CROSS, we have in fact become part of a community of people who really look seriously at how to do these schemes well. And CROSS is recognised worldwide, was becoming recognised worldwide. There's interest in the United States. The Structural Engineering Institute is enthusiastic about establishing CROSS US with a view to operating in a similar way, so that, in fact, anonymised reports can be shared internationally. And there's interest in Australia, Germany, and other countries. So whenever engineers gather to share experiences, I encourage that CROSS reports are used to stimulate those questions. Are we seeing these issues on our projects? Are we using the best available knowledge? And this is the heart of doing the best that we can. And encourage people to contribute their learning as well, so that they do their part to help the profession. Imagine how good this could be if globally within our profession we readily shared our experiences. We frequently hear that failing goes hand in hand with innovation. But in our industry, we cannot afford to fail when life safety depends on our work, and therefore sharing experience is critical. The mantra of the entrepreneur is fail often. For those of us in the built environment, we need to share often. We have been able to use the work of SCOS and CROSS to inform discussions on potential changes required in our industry that have been under discussion following the brick facade collapses in Edinburgh and, of course, the tragic Grenfell Tower fire. So the point is that CROSS is community learning, and here's a picture of what I mean by the effectiveness of community. The Berlin Velodrome and Schwimmsportshalle is a remarkable project I worked on with Tony Fitzpatrick, an astounding engineer who died too young. I recall the excitement of attending a race when it was complete, which was my first experience inside a live velodrome. Now, one type of cycle race is a fantastic metaphor for how we maximize our potential by working together. In this race, cyclists are brought up to speed over 8 laps by a motorized bicycle that sets the pace and gets them to the best point they could possibly be before they do 2 laps of sprint to the finish. So they compete, but from an equally advantageous starting point. So that's what I mean by community. As a learned society, we need to help everyone across our profession be at that equally advantageous starting point. And we all, of course, sprint in our own way to the finish. It may be that you are a pace setter on technical skills or running a business or client management. Regardless of the way that you choose to engage, each of us should think about how we support each other professionally to maximize our potential. So I really think this concept of community is vital. At Arup, we put considerable effort into fostering our community's practice, which we call skills networks. And we see them as the lifeblood of sharing expertise across the firm and also supporting collaboration beyond. Leaders of these networks are leaders in their industry, so this is across all different disciplines. And they inspire others to share and influence practice through code committees and thought leadership and so on. And with this work and our work in research and learning in the firm, we put together Arup University, and I'm very proud to have played a big part in establishing Arup University. Sharing communities help everybody to practice at their best. And within the institution, we want to strengthen our communities. So I've talked to you about broadening our outlook, about deepening expertise through our communities. And the third and final action I want to talk about and encourage everyone to pursue in the year ahead is leading to inspire and to inspire us through change. In times of change, we need leaders and leadership to encourage everyone across the profession to rise to the challenges, to inspire their colleagues to participate, and to share their vision for the future. I want the institution, wherever its members are meeting, to be the go-to organisation to help everyone move forward together. Leadership can and should be exercised at all levels. And for those more experienced, their encouragement to others allows them to challenge norms and investigate and work through their ideas. And this is very important. During my time at university, I was a cox in the college women's rowing team that was St Edmund Hall. And actually I was the first women's cox for this college because it had been an all-male college. And I was in the first intake of women engineers. As a cox, my job was to sit in the stern and look ahead, and the boat was powered by the energy of all these rowers who looked aft. And my responsibility was to see that we were making those steering adjustments to be able to navigate through the turns ahead. In many ways, this is not unlike the institution's role. We must look at the situation and identify changes which bring clear opportunities for our profession. Now, I want to just talk about a few challenges which are probably not things that keep you awake right now, but they are coming our way pretty rapidly. The first is machine learning. Rather like our own brains, machine learning uses neural networks to learn from data and to see patterns behind it, and then to use those patterns to make predictions. So I'm not an expert here, but we are probably all familiar with machine learning through face recognition. When you go through airports and your face is recognized, that's because a machine has been trained on millions of faces, far more than a person standing there could ever have in their experience. And I'm sure many of you are saying at home, "Hey Google," or "Alexa," speaking to a gadget which recognizes your voice. And that's machine learning which has brought that to us. Similarly, machine learning can help us in situations where we can use large sets of data, if we can compute them, to combine in new ways. And we can also use visual data, capture of information from visual capture, to give us better opportunities for design. Many examples are being researched, and what we can do is follow those examples and think how they might apply. One is natural flood management, which is an area where it's necessary to identify features in the landscape and think how they can play a part in managing floods and monitor them. And currently it's largely manual with many assumptions. But machine learning techniques can use satellite imagery to far more effectively identify those features. So think about the opportunity this brings us. If we go back to dealing with the complexity of building adaptability and reuse. Training a machine on combinations of design measures and inventories of materials and skills available in the area and different needs could help us resolve something which actually is way too complex for us to try and sort out in a short space of time. So another interesting development to watch is blockchain technology, because it has the potential to help us resolve issues of fragmentation in our construction industry. Most of you will have heard of Bitcoin as the virtual currency, which is an application of blockchain technology. And it has been in the news a lot because last year it hit a value above gold and then it's rapidly sunk. And there's discussion about its market share because of the rise of other cryptocurrencies. But fundamentally, it's a distributed ledger, which is a special type of database where contents are distributed across the network in multiple sites, for example, countries or institutions and different areas, and that uses cryptographic techniques to provide a transparent and permanent record, the ledger, of the activities, the transactions, between parties within that network. Blockchain technology creates a trust network because the validity of information is based on its place in the chain. I know this sounds pretty abstract, but we do talk a lot about disconnects in our industry, and it does have potential to help us. So, something to discuss. And truly integrated design, as I mentioned at the beginning, is something that requires an awful lot of coordination and understanding. It's not simple putting these things together: facade design and energy use, air pollution, acoustics. Blockchain could help us, the concept could help us to transform building information management, contracts, and assure integrity. My third area of change for us to discuss and think about what we do about it is social and demographic change. There is no longer a three-stage life of being educated, working, and retiring. Children born today in a developed country are more likely than not to live past 100 years old, and recently there's been discussion of 130 years old. Very soon, just about now, the working population is encompassing 5 generational waves, from those born in the 20s to 40s, who are kindly labelled as the traditionalists, through to baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, Generation Y, Generation Z, the iGen. They're all going to be in the workplace together. And they all have different expectations of work and patterns of working. People will experiment with work. They'll have multiple careers, and they'll collaborate in very different ways. I'm convinced that we're going to benefit from this hugely in the built environment, because we'll have people coming into the profession, say in their 40s or 50s, who have been in other walks of life, perhaps teaching or finance, whatever. And we need to make it attractive for people to move into engineering. We also need to not lose touch with those who move the other way, because the world that they then know is going to be helpful to us. Going forward, our profession will be a more diverse community, and we'll be better for it because we'll have all these different perspectives within the practice that we have. It will help us with understanding those different perspectives and being inclusive in our design. Now, you can identify many topics of change, and I've just talked about a few, and that's something I'd like to do as I visit other areas and see, well, what are you discussing around change, and how are you thinking about it? In many cases, it will be those earlier in their careers who forge new paths for the profession. But I want to call on the institution's fellows, as senior representatives of the profession, those who are fellows now and who will be fellows, to also visibly lead. I'm very keen to encourage fellows, because in doing so, in becoming a fellow, it does encourage other people to step up to a wider contribution. I was encouraged to be a fellow, and I'm really glad somebody did that. All of us have been inspired at some stage by somebody who pushed us to grow. And in my career, I've been so fortunate to learn from people who were passionate about sharing their experience and stimulating discussion, challenging me to look for the best ways of doing things. When I first began working in the office, it was the norm at lunchtime to pull up. We had wooden lockers which had your drawing instruments in, and sit on the lockers and eat sandwiches and talk about what you were working on and what you were learning, what you'd done for the first time. Had you looked enough at what other people were doing? And I mentioned Percy Halpin II, who may never know how much of an inspiration he was, I'm sure, to many. We should never underestimate how much other people appreciate us giving them time by sharing insights and giving them confidence. And this is why an inclusive approach from leaders is so important, enabling everyone to be part of our profession and making the most of everyone's skills to take us forward. And the institution is moving in a very positive direction of seeing that there are multiple different paths for learning opportunities. The structural behaviour tests give access to fundamental structural learning and understanding to anybody, anywhere. And specialist diplomas are looking at recognising skills in a particular area, whether you're or not the candidate is a member of the institution. And I think that's really important, that it isn't just a linear one-size-fits-all, but there is a plural view to how people are engaged with us and us with them. So this year, as we work towards a creative and collaborative future, with the complexity of challenges ahead, this institution is as relevant as ever before. We stand for a broad outlook, a deep technical excellence, where we actively share and learn with one another, and leadership that embraces the future and inspires creativity. These are the three actions I want to pursue during my presidency in the coming year. We are people, designing for people. Arup frequently doodled and wrote limericks, published in a lovely book called Doodles and Doggerels. One of his poems has these last two lines: "All our achievements will lead to calamity if we neglect our common humanity." And as I take over the presidency for the Institution of Structural Engineers for 2018, I look forward to meeting and working with many of you around the world. I hope to encourage you in your discussions about how we prepare for challenges ahead and to learn more about your work and collaborative endeavours. Thank you.